of the board here. All right, at 2:01, I'll call this meeting to order. And thank you all for being here. If you'll note the roll for us. Do we have anybody that signed up for public comments? Okay, I see a head shaking no, so no public comments. No need for an executive session today. So our first item will be number 4, which is going to be a report from the TAC. Chad.
Thank you, Chair Long. I'll cover that. So the Technical Advisory Committee met
Can you speak up a little bit?
The Technical Advisory Committee met on August 25th, and we had 4 information items on the agenda. This included an update from Will Liska and our consultant team on the interchange bottleneck study being conducted by CAMPO, an overview of the study, including results from stakeholder feedback and data collection, were presented, along with initial prioritization list and a short list of 4 interchange locations that will be examined for preliminary concept development. We had a presentation and discussion on the 2015 to 2024 State of Safety Report from Jeff Kaufman with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, and this will be brought to the policy board as an information item at a future meeting. Following that, we had a presentation on CAMPO's Regional Safety Action Plan. The draft final plan was provided for TAC members to review, with the deadline for that review being just last Friday, September 5th. So this item will also be brought to the policy board at a future meeting after TAC has completed its review. And finally, NIRVED informed the TAC that with the funding restored for CAMPO's Transportation Demand Management, or TDM, program, we will recommence meetings of the TDM subcommittee, and he asked for TAC members to provide nominations for their agencies to be on the subcommittee. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Any questions about the TAC meeting? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. We will move on to item number 5. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes? Okay, motion by Mr. Harris, second by Mayor Schrader. Any comments, questions on the minutes? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, the meeting schedule for 2026. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in your board packet, you'll have the meeting dates for next year for 2026 there, and you'll see them up on the screen if you've not had a chance to look at them yet. We did, I think, for the October meeting next year, we made a little bit of adjustment, so that one's not the second Monday of the month either, as this one this year will not be. So I'm just reminding all of you that we sent out a change to the schedule because the 13th of October of this year is Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day, which is a holiday for many of the local governments. So we moved it up. This facility was available. We moved the October 13th meeting of this year up to October 6th. So just as a reminder to you, but here's the items for next year. And a reminder on next year's meetings that we normally don't meet in March, and we normally don't meet in July because many of you are either on spring break or on summer break. I will try my best not to schedule anything there unless it's just absolutely necessary.
So if you show up the second week of October, you'll be here by yourself. Thank you. All right, let's see. Item number 7, discuss and take appropriate action on the regional truck parking plan contract.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. At the September 2024 meeting, about 364 days ago last year, this policy board adopted the regional freight plan. And one of the recommendations from that plan was the need for a truck parking study in this region. Truck parking is necessary for a variety of reasons. Truckers need to meet their federally required rest requirements. Trucks also need space to stage for loading and unloading or the delivery and receipt of goods. And this region in particular has an acute need for truck parking. So to do that, we went through our regular procurement process, which we issued an RFP in mid-June, received responses from 4 firms, and then 2 were selected for interviews. And at the end of that process, the result was that the firm WSP is the highest ranking firm, and staff is requesting that the Transportation Policy Board authorize the Executive Director to negotiate and execute a contract to conduct the regional truck parking plan with the highest ranking firm. That's my presentation. Look forward to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
all right, had a couple questions. First of all, I would ask if you would check Rudy's pulse next to you. His daughter just got her driver's license. So just want to make sure he's all right.
You need to check my wallet, too.
Well, I have a daughter as well. You can forget your wallet. All right, so I don't want to slow this down at all, but I'm interested in the way that you are doing a risk assessment on where you're putting facilities, because I'm just interested in whether we're listening to our sheriff's offices, some of our neighborhood associations about hot spots. You know, we've got a couple areas, Sprinkle Cutoff, and a couple neighborhoods where oftentimes some vehicles are parked, but there's no alternative. So I'm wondering if we're looking at the hot spots that, from the sheriff's offices or the PDs or neighborhood associations to make sure that we are addressing challenges that we know exist today.
Yes, absolutely. Unauthorized parking is one of the key parts of assessing where the trucks are parking right now, because if they're not parking, if there's no parking there, then they're parking in the neighborhoods where they're idling all night long, or just, it's a safety concern. So identifying where those locations are that they're already parking is actually, I think, the second task, aside from doing the administrative part of the contract.
Okay, so the Travis County Transportation Team and the Sheriff's Office will certainly encourage them to work directly with you and give you the information that we have been compiling.
Oh, perfect. We look forward to working with them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion on this item?
Move approval.
Okay. Second. Who was the second? Okay. Trevelyan and then Howard. Thank you all. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Nira, appreciate that. Item number 8. As you all know, we annually evaluate our executive director, and I want to thank the 15 board members who sent back their evaluation. The executive committee met last Friday to review all of those and then review it with Mr. Johnson. And I'm happy to say that he continues to do well. Not that I was surprised, but a 4.67 out of 5 is pretty darn good. So congratulations on that, Ashby. I'm just going to read a couple of the comments that came from different board members, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free. And I'm just not in any particular order. Ashby is frequently included in statewide and national conferences and committees as a testament to his knowledge, experience, and the respect that he has earned. Ashby has done a fantastic job for us and our region. I appreciated both the thoroughness of Ashby's new member orientation and his responsiveness with respect to follow-up questions. I believe Ashby to be an expert in his field and someone that others look to for advice and help. Great job on another clean audit. Ashby's national reach is a recognition of the respect he has across the nation and an acknowledgement of his effectiveness of leading CAMPO. And that's just kind of a summary of the comments, but I've had the opportunity to work with Ashby, I guess, coming up on 11 years now, and I will underscore some of those comments. He continues to give CAMPO a great name because he's a great representative of CAMPO, and really his skills and abilities make us look good. So thank you, Ashby, for all your amazing work. Is there any comments from any of the other board members or executive committee members?
I want to reiterate what you said about Ashby. Came into a very interesting situation, has handled the entirety of it, not only well, but taking it to another level. We appreciate that. And I also appreciate that the comments from each and every one of you, including items speaking specifically about things that you'd want to hear more about, better understand our role and our position on. I thought Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes brought up a really good point about trying to, figure out, okay, what's the policy aspect and what are the things that we're going from that. It says a lot about y'all paying attention to what we need and things that are going on in the region, and we're lucky. We know we're lucky to have you here, Ashby, so we very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I will only agree with my colleagues to say that Ashley is always available. Willing to work, willing to come and see what it is you're talking about in the field. He's not someone who is locked to his desk. We appreciate that, but after hearing the both of you, I'm wondering whether he is an Aggie or a Longhorn. I guess,
There's only one answer to that. Let's not get
color of his
crazy here,
jacket
Jeff.
today.
Let's not get crazy here, Jeff.
Do you see the color of his jacket today, Commissioner?
Nobody needs to be a hero, Jeff. Okay, let's calm down.
I was just wondering. I didn't know.
Again, thank you all for participating in the process. I know he appreciates it and the feedback, and and I encouraged him if there was something that didn't make sense, he's going to be reaching out to the individual that might have commented on that. And the recommendation from the executive committee is a 4% increase to his salary, which is somewhat in line. If y'all remember, CAMPO is Williamson County is the fiscal agent for CAMPO, and this year for employees, there's a 2% cost of living and a 2% merit pool available for employees. So that 4% would be in line with what's kind of going on in the county. So that's my motion, is that we award Ashby a 4% increase and accept his evaluation.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any other comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ashby. Do you want any comments?
So I'll just briefly say some of what I said to the exec committee, that, and some of this I said to you last year. This is the freest I've felt in any job that I've had in my career, and so, and I hope it shows. Some of the things that y'all have supported me on when I walked in and said, oh, can you give me some money to do this thing that no MPO has ever done in the country, you've done that. One, I was surprised, but two, I'm appreciative of the opportunities that y'all have provided, not just me, but also my staff. And several of you also in your comments on my evaluation mentioned how you think my staff is doing a great job, and I appreciate you noticing that and remarking on that. And then to Councilmember Matea's point about Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes asking about policy and changing things, and so I texted Mayor Pro Tem this morning and told her we have made adjustments to item 10 coming up to lay out those things, so we were immediately responsive to that. So, and I hope it comes out the way you thought it would. But thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate all of you participating in that. All right. So that motion passed. We're moving on to item number 9, which is the financial audit. Teresa, are you going to kick that off?
Yes. Good afternoon. In accordance with the Federal Code of Regulations, a single audit is required for an entity that expends $750,000 or more in federal awards during the entity's fiscal year. CAMPO's 2024 single audit was completed in June. It was a clean audit, and that was performed by our auditors, Montemayor, Britton, Bender, Carey, PC. And here to present the results of the audit is Mr. Sean Bender.
Welcome.
Is this working?
I think you might have turned it off.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, as Teresa was saying, we finished up the financial statement for the financial statement audit for September 30th, 2024. About 2 months ago, we expressed a clean opinion on the financial statements and footnotes. We also, which means, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with GAAP. And because you guys were over the $750,000, the threshold of federal award spending and state award spending, we did a state single audit and a federal single audit. And the results of that was, in our opinion, you did comply with all the direct and material compliance requirements of those major programs, both federal and state. We also speak to internal control. So during the financial statement audit, we didn't note any deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting. Also, on the grant compliance side, we didn't note any internal control deficiencies over compliance. So that's the high-level summary of the audit. So that's as clean as it gets. Clean, 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 clean. So good job, everybody. Management's financial statements we express our opinion on. We also issue a second document. It's called Communications with Those Charged with Governance, in addition to the financial statement audit. And as your auditors, we're required to communicate certain things, that basically how the audit went. And so this would be where we would report any difficulties in dealing with management or disagreements on accounting treatments or anything, but there's nothing negative to report in this document either. So clean on that respect as well.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? And just congratulations to Teresa and team. You make it sound really easy, clean audit, but to get there, it's a lot of hard work. So I appreciate your diligence in making sure that they get to come up here and say clean audit. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
All right, thank you all. Okay, we are now down, and that doesn't require action, that was just the report out. We are down now to item number 10, and there are 2 people that have signed up for citizens' comments, Adam Greenfield and Miriam Schoenfeld. Adam, you're first, and Miriam, if you'll come up and get in line behind him, and let me get my...
Good up.
Yeah, you'll have 3 minutes. Just hang on 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Adam Greenfield here with Safe Streets Austin. I'm speaking on agenda item 10 regarding potential recommendations from the CAMPO scoring committee. As you know, how we score projects, how CAMPO scores projects is incredibly important. In the CAMPO RTP, it speaks to reducing per capita VMT. It speaks to increasing safety, and yet in our region, we are trending in the opposite direction. And many people in the community think that we need to look at how CAMPO's projects are scored so that the goals of the RTP and CAMPO's plans are better aligned with the projects that are being selected. So we strongly support this process to reevaluate project scoring. And we also strongly believe that that process should be public. So we have questions when we see on today's agenda a discussion of the scoring committee's recommendations when we just haven't seen a public process. We would also think that that public process would also include a review of other MPOs scoring and best practices across Texas and across the country. So we continue to support a thorough process to reevaluate project scoring, and we hope that that process happens before any final vote. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next is Miriam Schoenfeld. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and Board members. Miriam Schoenfield here with We Think 35. So yes, many of us in the community were very heartened to learn in May that CAMPO was undertaking a review and these committees were formed to look at scoring and modeling. But we do have some concerns about how the process has developed. I noticed late this week that there was a change in the agenda. An item was modified to now include that there would be a report of the recommendations from the scoring committee. But the recommendations were not provided in the agenda, so I reached out to several members of the committee to find out what the recommendations were. Nobody I spoke to on the scoring committee was able to tell me what the scoring committee was recommended, and indeed I was told that the committee did not vote on any recommendations. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to hear today, but as of late last week, multiple members of the scoring committee did not know what these recommendations were going to be. This itself is a red flag. Second of all, my understanding is that there's a plan for this to be voted on in October, and at least according to the slides that I saw that I got through a public information request, the main topic, namely how projects are scored, how these different factors are weighted, has yet to be addressed by the committee. And finally, we were told in May that this was going to be an iterative process with multiple opportunities for feedback. This is very important. There should be feedback from other board members, from members of the TAC, from elected officials, from stakeholders, from community. None of that has yet happened. So I understand there's a call for projects happening in October. I understand not much is going to change between now and then, but our ask is that this is the process that we were told to happen in May has not yet taken place and still needs to take place. We, over the summer, have done quite a bit of work. We have reviewed MPO scoring systems around the country. We've looked at best practices. We've spoken to national experts. I think this feedback would be useful to y'all, and we look forward to engaging with the process when it takes place. Thank you.
All right, that's all on public comment, and so on to item number 10, and just to update the policy board, the scoring committee met on June the 6th and again on July the 18th, and went through a thorough background of how we got to where we are with the scoring criteria, all of the inputs, the methodology, in fairly excruciating detail. And lots of good questions and dialogue from the committee members. We also got input and looked at what other MPOs are doing, and really one of the takeaways for me was that other people are looking to how we're doing it. We're sort of leading the pack in terms of scoring and how we do that. And some MPOs don't score at all. They just pick projects. So, you know, which was kind of surprising to me, but I'm not sure how they get there, but that's how the sausage is made for them. And then after we finished, we had some discussion about what, if any, changes needed to be made, and knowing that the call for projects was coming up. And it was really sort of one minor tweak that, and really with regard to how nonprofits might submit for projects, and Ryan's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But there weren't, and the reason there wasn't, you know, a bigger report is there really, amongst the committee members, there was not any big major recommendations for change. They felt like that the process has worked. And just as a reminder to the board, we've used this current process for a big, I say big call for projects, a multi-million-dollar call for projects, really just one time. We've used it for other calls that have been smaller pots of money, but if this went through a year-and-a-half long process back a decade ago to look at scoring, and it was used, and then we kind of had the let's pause on the I-35 funding stuff. So this project process coming up will be the first time that we've really, or only the second time that it's really been heavily used. But again, there weren't any, there was discussion about should we limit the number of applications that any one entity could do, and that, said, no, we're going to let people do what they want to with that. And, talked about a number of different things, should it be changed to change the weights in certain ways? But there's the balance of trying to make sure that smaller communities can submit a project and be able to have a chance at funding, and balanced out by those who have, dozens of employees and teams that can put these together. So because we are a regional body, we tried to make sure that it continued to have that flavor so that projects from Burnett County would have a shot, just like projects from Travis County. And Krista, you're the only other one that's here today. Do you have any other comments from the meetings?
That's a shame, I will say, first of all. Is that on? Is it on for this? Okay. All right. Yes, I was very happy to be able to participate in this working group, and I do think that the discussions were, the selection of people in the discussions made for an engaged discussion that had different perspectives from different sizes of entities and types of entities. I myself learned a lot, and I very much appreciate that. I have also been engaging outside of our committee meetings with others in the community who expressed interest in these projects, including two of our speakers here, then within the city of Austin and that sort of thing. And I found it incredibly useful, but I am one of the people who said that I wasn't sure what the recommendations would be, because my recollection of how he left it was that there were multiple topics where we had a very lively discussion, and then Ashby was going to take that into consideration and come back with whatever recommendations might relate to that. Now, at this point, it's been some time since we met, and the other thing that I have definitely seen firsthand is I think it would, in fact, be quite valuable for future meetings to make them accessible to whoever might be interested in learning more. I mean, I learned a lot, and I really felt that everyone at the table valued the discussions, and I've done my best to relay info, but there is simply no substitute for being able to see the presentations that were given and the discussion that's engaged in. And I do think we left some things open, not resolved in terms of what the outcomes were out of that committee, and I myself thought that that was partially because members of the board who were not on the committee had expressed interest in opportunities for input, such as today, and that sort of thing. And so I was actually looking forward to hearing what recommendations would come forward myself. So
yeah,
I think,
and as if you're at the end of the last meeting, as we were talking, I think we settled on that there were some things that could be looked at, but for this call for projects, kind of narrowing it down, because we are up against a time frame to get that done, that the tweak to the nonprofit piece was what was doable this time, and that more robust discussions on other topics potentially. But I mean, unless I'm missing something,
I'll just jump in and try to provide a little bit of clarification on what I heard, and I think hopefully this helps. So this presentation that you're going to get shortly is about the criteria that's in use and potential changes for the Transportation Improvement Program, for the TIP. It is not about the long-range plan.
That's a good clarification, sorry.
And on the long-range plan, Councilmember Lane, that's the piece where we said we were going to come back, because that you won't be dealing with again for another 5 years. But, so we can come back to that as early as next few months, next year, when we start in earnest on working for the next long-range plan. But for this one, we need to get started in the fall. So I think that's what the clarification was.
yes, and that was actually the next question I was going to put out there, because I definitely understood while we were having the meeting, and I know y'all did a really good job helping me learn, and others learn what that process is, that there was some urgency in some ways, but I myself was looking forward to clarification also on what exactly is creating the urgency, and especially when is the funding going to be available relative to when this October selection is made. And I'll keep in mind what you just shared about the long-range plan. Thank you.
Those questions will be addressed in the presentation, including the timelines for the money, because the money has dates on it, basically. We have to spend it in a certain timeline, or we risk losing it to other parts of the state. So that's what that part was there. And then also, as far as the slides have not been put up that were presented to the committee, but everything else that was presented is on the website and has been on the website for over 4 years.
Yeah.
There's nothing new that this board or the TAC has not seen.
So, like I said, the near-term recommendation for this particular scoring exercise was the minor piece regarding, if you remember, it was having that nonprofit have a sponsor, a governmental sponsor to be able to submit. And we can vote on that. This was just sort of the report out. And then the modeling committee, because of some scheduling conflicts and really just literally staff resources, we postponed the modeling thing to kick off in October-ish timeframe, so that we weren't bogging staff down with 2 different committees running at the same time. So that one, you'll hear back from them after they've met later on. But that, because of the timeliness of this, I wanted just to give you all that feedback at this point. And then that's really all I have from the committee. And then Ryan will go through the call for projects and how that one tweak makes its way into that in terms of a recommendation.
Chair Long?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It's good to see everybody. I guess I'd be interested in, if we don't have time now, I don't know why we didn't meet in August, but if we don't have time now to have a robust conversation about scoring for this tip cycle, then since we have time for the long-range plan, as well as the modeling work would be done for that, it seems like we could take the learning that has occurred and build on that with either agenda items here so everybody can participate and the public can comment, or yet another format of work session or something. I'm glad to hear that y'all, have looked at what other MPOs have done, and it sounds like our partners in the community have done that too. So it would be great to just share that information and let us all know how we're, doing in comparison with our partners.
Okay. Any other comments before Ryan starts?
I'll second that. I would second, the modeling committee hasn't met, and we had a great discussion on the areas that we talked about, and I guess the recommendation that came out was no changes, right, for the other couple things. But perhaps there are other issues that we have heard raised via public comment over the months that I've been here, and perhaps discussion of scoring in some of these areas, plus the modeling, could become a work session format if people so wish. I just wanted to affirm that. I think that would be helpful.
All right. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to clear my throat right in the microphone. And thanks for that discussion. So this item is really to kind of set the stage for the 2028 to 2031 call for projects. Really want to talk about, just kind of take a step back, and I'll get into a little bit of what we discussed during the scoring committee. But the funding programs that this board has direct allocation authority on are these 3 here. The Surface Transportation Block Grant program, which is our largest program. The majority, I think it's like 90% of our funding is STBG funding, is what we typically call it. This is our most flexible bucket of funding. You can essentially spend it on anything related to transportation. And then we've got 2 smaller programs, the Transportation Alternative Set Aside Program, as well well as the carbon reduction program. And both of these are carve-outs of the SDBG program, and they provide funding specifically for smaller scale transportation projects such as pedestrian and bicycle facilities, safe routes to school projects, as well as other community improvements. And then the carbon reduction program is very similar to the TASA program, where it provides, you can fund anything that's eligible under TASA, but it also includes ITS, transportation demand management, and other measures that reduce emissions. And so the two bottom ones are basically anything that doesn't add single occupancy vehicle capacity to the transportation network is eligible under those two programs. And so kind of talking, this is a very high level review of the process that we use for the call for projects. Step 1 and 2 are probably the most important, where we review eligibility of submitted projects, and then we do a thorough readiness assessment to make sure that projects that you do fund can actually move forward as scheduled and hit all of the federal the milestones that are required by the federal process. And so kind of stepping back to what the scoring committee is recommending is eligibility. Nonprofits are eligible to submit under federal regulations, but as we've gone through this process, we realized we're going to be recommending that nonprofits partner with a local government sponsor in order to submit, and the reason for that is to provide that stability. Nonprofits, local governments obviously have are stable and have a stable financial stream, and so if a nonprofit wants to submit, we want to ensure that partnership solidifies the existence of that nonprofit, and ensuring that projects can move forward not only through implementation, but that maintenance and operations are also accounted for as well in perpetuity. And so that's something that a local government sponsor in partnership with a nonprofit can provide. And so that will be the only recommendation to this process that we'll be recommending in October for potential approval by the policy board. Everything else is considered will be remaining the same. And then
so Ryan, to that point, because I find that interesting, and it's obviously we never do anything in a vacuum, right? Yeah. And so, have you found previously that when in fact a nonprofit has unilaterally, for a better lack of term, made a call into others' aspects.
Gone under.
Yeah, the stability hasn't necessarily been there at times for how they've operated, because I'm guessing some folks may think, hey, listen, why would they want to partner with a governmental entity? But just like you said, the reliability of a governmental entity and what its actions and everything else there is going to be there's a steady case. And my impression would be that at times that may not always be the case with whoever may be partnering with independently.
Yeah, and that's a good question. So we have actually never awarded a nonprofit until this last award cycle, and it's actually a partnership study with the Great Springs Project. We've got 2 studies that we'll be doing with them, but it was through those discussions, and Ashby, I don't know if you want to expand on this a little bit, but it was one of those things like the maintenance and operations, I think when we build a facility, some nonprofits, it was just one of those risks that we saw coming down and I haven't had this experience. You may have been at HGAC in your time in Houston, but it was one of those things that was a risk we didn't want to take, and so providing that stability through the local government
I think
partnership.
I was remiss, Commissioner Terrio, you were there as well, so I forgot to let you chime in if you had anything to offer, but I think one of the things we saw is it would afford the nonprofit perhaps the ability to score a little bit better, because they have more of that financial stability backing behind them. So was kind of the thought behind that.
That was one of the things I was going to say. Because of this process that we're currently going through, well, the one that we just finished where y'all awarded the projects, in some cases the nonprofit was having a difficult time identifying the match required under federal law. And having a local government sponsor could perhaps help with that. The other reason we're asking y'all to make this change is because last year TxDOT changed the Texas Administrative Code rules on the surface transportation block grant category, but it's not just that category. So for the 3 categories of funding that y'all allocate, they changed the rules. And if we don't get that money spent on the timelines that have been laid out, then they can take the money allocate it to this region and move it to another part of the state. And so we're trying to make sure that we don't get in a situation risk-wise where we have a sponsor that may not be completely able to navigate the federal process and has the experience navigating the federal process, and we have our money held up and then potentially moved to another part of the state.
Can you send out that TAC link? And because that's huge. That's TAC, changing that, because I think that would be pretty good educational standpoint from folks on that, but that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of sponsorship, I just want to make sure I understand what we were saying there. So is it basically a guarantee from the local government entity?
Yeah.
So they would be fully guaranteeing what their commitments are?
Cedar Park is paying for everything.
Yeah, so if for whatever reason...
And in some cases, we're happy to. But also in those cases, why have a nonprofit sponsor if you already have a governmental sponsor? It feels like
That's a good question.
And I could also see it making it a difference between whether it's construction versus planning, because, obviously construction, like once stakes are in the ground, right?
Yes.
Like there's no undoing that, or not without expense. But sometimes planning, you have certain cross-cutting things. I'm just very mindful of one of the benefits my community has, which is with the tremendous partnership with the YMCA and Twin Lakes Park, and it was really great having the YMCA continue. It's something that my family benefits from and most other Cedar Park residents, because you have all these different jurisdictions, the state owns some of that land, and having kind of a nonprofit.
It's a county park now. It's a county park.
Yeah, and it's a county park, but it's basically administered by the YMCA. It's a great public-private partnership, and I wouldn't want us to necessarily take ourselves out of that benefit, where we've all seen, especially in our region, the benefits of having nonprofits and local governments collaborate.
Yeah, at least, I don't know, Commissioner or council member, you can chime in on how we landed there, but I think it was to broaden the opportunities rather than restrict it, was the idea.
Commissioner Long, would the nonprofits be subject to the same, procurement processes as?
Yes, they're subject to federal procurement laws.
Yeah,
I was thinking that might be an advantage if they.
That's another reason having a local government sponsor helps.
Okay. Well, I was hoping they weren't going to be.
We've just gotten hundreds of millions of dollars out the door over the last few years, and it's very difficult for nonprofit partners to have to go through our process and become our sub-recipients of the federal money. If it's more strategic for them, they can get a nonprofit, a government partner, but I see this as limiting what nonprofits might choose to do, and to me they ought to be able to compete, and the scoring process should figure out if they're eligible and if they're able to withstand the federal process. Our rules are very difficult for nonprofits to achieve federal funding through us. So I would think they would see this and be disappointed and not say, oh, this is going to help us.
Could I piggyback off that?
Yeah.
Maybe it could be a criteria that you could apply as a nonprofit without a government sponsor, and if your financials were sound enough that you could potentially get it without the sponsor, or if they weren't and you brought a government sponsor behind you, but that was just part of the criteria, was your financial stability with or without the government sponsor, but you weren't knocked out of evaluation just because you didn't. The YMCA's balance sheet's pretty strong with or without Cedar Park.
They haven't applied, just to be clear. That's
and there's a long track record there to go by, and so with that we can look at the books and see.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges is there's a couple of nonprofits out there that are fairly new, that are seeking funding for certain projects, and they're not going to be able to make it on their own. And
then they should team up with a local government partner.
Yeah.
And that's
Then
what we're
I don't
hoping.
think we should require it.
That's what we're hoping they'll do. But
Commissioner? Your mic's. I don't think your mic's on. Up is on.
Now is it?
There you
okay.
go.
as I recall the discussion, it was definitely from a standpoint of trying to increase the opportunities for nonprofits to be eligible for funding. The discussion dealt a lot with their difficulties in having the scorers having surety that the finances were there for them to make the match and other aspects of it. I don't know that that's the only way it can be done with a government guarantee. Perhaps there are other methods out there that can provide the surety that's needed. That I would be all in favor of that, as many opportunities as possible. But I think that without something like that, they're not going to score, or many of them won't score high enough to qualify, just because it's very difficult for them to guarantee that money is going to be there.
So this is where, I know, getting legalese over here. Okay, so when the TAC code changes, which, I mean, again, a TAC is the interpretation of what the specific statutes are on the books for the state of Texas, and it's the rules that are promulgated for that, which means that this is what the Constitution says, or the statute says. This is what the rules are that we interpret from that, and you have to follow these rules. With that change, that may change the conversation of what we're having here with that, because it does sound like, just like you said, that, hey, listen, we want more people to be able to have a possibility to do so, but the specific rules on surety and other aspects of that have changed. So consequently, there may be a need or desire to actually have someone like a governmental entity to go ahead and partner with that. That's not necessarily necessitates that, but it sounds like theoretically we could go through the process and then tell the person, hey, listen, you're not going to make it, and then tell them, hey, you may want to partner with a governmental entity. And if the TAC rules have changed, then I would say for us, because who creates our processes? We do. So if our processes are difficult in our respective entities, we need to look at our process changes too, to accommodate the ability for folks, for these NGOs, for a better lack of term, to be able to go ahead and partner with these governmental entities for these things.
Madam Chair, it seems that we are under a process now where our rules are changing, and the interpretation of lots of our rules are changing. And I think at some point we have to identify, have a vertically integrated system where we identify all of the considerations and identify who has adopted best practices or practices that work. Something that will work in a larger city that has a city auditor that has a lot of resources, or a county that has that. You might have more options. But at the end of the day, we need to develop an understanding of what the rules are in effect now.
So are you talking about the rules within each entity?
Well, I'm talking about an alignment. So we probably would have to put an asset map together that talks about the environments that we're working in, the rules that we're working with, and how is it that we can align ourselves and make projects work. When we look, when Commissioner Howard was talking about the processes that we used, we had an auditor involved. We had budget analysts involved, and we crafted programs that nonprofits could participate with. They did not have the capacity to do it themselves. So what we did was we laid out everything that was on the table, aligned the appropriate things, and built a matrix that made sense. At the end of the day, because what I'm saying is, in an environment where so many things are shifting, the way that the federal government gives money, where they don't give money anymore, we need to really slow down a little bit, identify what's on the table, and then identify what works. I mean, at the end of the day, things are 180 degrees different than they were just 6 months ago. So I think it's important to evaluate what the new rules of the game are, and how the entities that normally work with us will maintain the capacity to work with us, or gain access in other ways. It just seems to me that we're in a situation of flux, and the only way to bring normalcy to it is to start off with defining where we are and what we have that we can work together with.
Yeah. So I agree. I think each entity is probably going to has their own process, and some don't work with nonprofits at all. So I think it runs the gamut of, and I think at least I would suspect that each different organization is going to have their own priorities and values reflective in which nonprofits that they work with. And I don't know that we're going to get standardization across entities on that, because I think that's specific to Travis County and Hayes County and whatnot, where I do think, and Ashby's done a good job of trying to figure out, has anything changed on the federal side or on the state side that's going to affect this call for project process? And the main thing there is what he's highlighted in terms of the level of accountability in delivering on projects that are awarded. And so that one, I think, is partly what gave rise to the conversation of, we don't want to be awarding projects to somebody who's not going to be able to deliver. And so that was really what gave rise to this level of conversation around this. And I think the mayor brings up a point that you can go find a local government to partner with, and your chances, quite frankly, are going to be better. Or you can go it on your own, and that's a perfectly acceptable route. I think just realistically as a board, we need to remember that and as you're talking to these folks, remind them that complying with the federal regulations is difficult, and it adds cost and overhead to your project, and they just need to be aware of that. I mean, and it hasn't, this is a really minor issue, because it has not in the past really been an issue, because we haven't had nonprofits seeking funding from CAMPO. It's mostly been Cap Metro, local governments, TxDOT, that sort of thing. So it hasn't really been an issue, and I really don't foresee it being a big issue, because quite frankly the regulations scare most people off anyway. But if there's sort of a happy medium there of, they can seek to partner with a local government or submit on their own, but just understanding that there are significant legal or financial requirements that are going to be embedded in the process. Mayor.
Would a bond be included, requirement for a bond be included?
I mean, we haven't had to do that in the past, because it's been a local government.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the nonprofit, the organizations.
Yeah,
not necessarily recommending, I'm just asking.
Yeah, that is not anything we've complicated or contemplated in the scoring. I don't know if staff, if y'all have talked about it. I will say, thinking about bonding though, for anybody who's tried to go after an entity that had a bond, we're still in a lawsuit over that. So
your bond agent will probably say, you need a local government sponsor.
Yeah, we're still in 2 lawsuits over somebody who bonded some work. So
yeah, we hadn't thought about that, Mayor.
That may be a hill too high for a nonprofit, and I understand that, but I just was curious.
I mean, I think they can try to figure that out, and that could be part of their submittal. I don't know that we need to solve that for them, but if that's part of how they decide to submit, and have that financial guarantee, that can be looked at.
I think so. I think that if they want to submit their specific way, let them submit. I think that it is on us to encourage and talk to our partners about what's changed from the TAC and the applicable criterion involved.
And when he's saying TAC, he's not meaning our technical advisory committee. He's meaning the Texas Administrative Code. So,
And did you,
just
was
a clarification.
the premise that the code has changed and it requires a nonprofit to partner with?
No. It requires timely delivery of projects. And that's what led to the conversation about, are they going to be able to do that?
Okay.
And given the fact that
I don't want to give a penny back, but I don't like limiting what organizations can do.
And, you know, again, we can be frank here. We know there's a difference between when we actually have a project that we want to do and when it actually lets. And so if they're saying, hey, wait a minute, this is not going to be executed in the specific time frame that was given, we don't want to have to go ahead and give that money back. So that makes sense. But yeah, so I agree. I think that they can apply, just be ready. And hopefully someone listened to the last 20 minutes of this meeting to understand that.
Yeah, and then, you know, if you as local governments are going to have conversations with nonprofits that might be contemplating applying for the upcoming project call, if you would also remind them of this fundamental requirement under the Federal Aid Highway Program, which is it is a reimbursable program. You've got to have the money up front, and you have to spend it up front, and then you get reimbursed after Federal Highways has looked and determined that all your expenses were eligible expenses. Because some folks have been surprised when we told them that.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem, you had a question?
My question was about a project that wasn't able to be completed for what happens to that money? It just goes back. It doesn't go to another.
So for us in this situation, and we're going to address some of this in the rest of the presentation, right now we're trying to construct a process where we will have other projects in line waiting and potentially ready to go to take that money, and we would ask the board to then what's called de-obligate from that project that was funded, and then obligate that money to another project ready to go, so we don't lose it as a region.
Perfect, thank you.
So why don't we keep moving through the presentation, and then we can circle back on this topic, but...
No, absolutely, because we're definitely going to get back to that question, and I also want y'all to hold on to that discussion about the TAC rule, because that plays into the discussion a little bit later as well. And the only other thing I would want to add, and appreciate the conversation, is that, you know, with the nonprofit situation, it's all about risk. And local governments represent a much lower risk than a nonprofit, and that's really what the readiness assessment and eligibility is about. It's about assessing risk of a project being implemented, and then at the end of the day, and this is especially important for construction projects, if a nonprofit were to construct a facility, who's going to maintain that in perpetuity for the next 30 years? A local government is more likely to be around than a nonprofit. I mean, there are obviously some nonprofits that have been around for hundreds of years, but, you know, like the YMCA or something like that, but that's really what the principle behind it is, though. It's about risk more than anything else. And so when we bring that recommendation back next month, I just want that to be, we'll discuss that a little bit more. And sorry, I've got two of these. So kind of jumping back, and so after readiness, we do the benefit evaluation, which we score all the different types of projects in step 3. And then everything is compiled into one master list, and then we make our recommendation based on the results, the rankings, and then the funding availability. So that's the process in a nutshell. And then this is the tentative schedule that we have for this upcoming call for projects. It's basically a 2-part process, where in the fall is where we're tentatively scheduled to open up the project call after the board meeting in October. And then we'll have the local government sponsors and your staff will have close to a little over 3 months actually to put together their submittal applications. We'll have information sessions, probably more than just 3, and then some open office hours is basically where I'll be providing educational opportunities about the process and supporting your staff in putting together the applications. And then once pencils are down on January 23rd in 2026, we'll click into the review process process where staff and our general engineering consultant and TxDOT will review all the projects, make sure they are ready, and then we'll do the scores. Tentatively, we have that scheduled for action on June 8th, 2026. I do want to caveat that if we get a lot of applications and some of these projects are very complex, if we need a little bit more time to do the review process, we may tentatively move this into August and September for the approval action. But currently, we are targeting the June 8th, 2026 board meeting for recommendation.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Ryan, the scoring criteria, has it been established yet, and where can we see it?
Yes, yeah. So it's available online now, but it's the same scoring criteria that we've had since 2017 is when it was approved. So nothing has changed there. And so on this slide, I've got a funding breakdown. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this on the next slide, but wanted to give you kind of a breakdown of the programs. So our actual projection for surface transportation block grant funding is close to $250 million. TASA funding will have a little over close to $31 million, and then a little over $10 million for the carbon reduction program. Now, surface transportation block grant funding is earliest availability for programming on a project is going to be fiscal year 2028, and then TASA and CRP will be available for programming in fiscal year 2027. So a little bit earlier, but that's because we have rolled over a little bit of funding from the previous project call. One thing I always like to say that these are estimates, and these assume the continued authorization of current formula programs that are in federal law. Obviously, reauthorization for the current federal bill is upcoming and actually should be starting up about now in Congress, and so we'll see where that goes. But these are, particularly the surface transportation block grant funding has been around for 40 years, and is a very stable program, and so we always program ahead of time so that projects are ready to go once that funding is actually deposited to our federal bank account.
So right before you move off the slide, Mayor Pro Tem, if you'll notice, we laid out the three different scenarios of what we considered there, the 15%, which is what we actually do today of over-programming, and then the 30 and the 50%. So that's what I was referencing when I said, so you can see what things we looked at.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody in that recommendation? Because that's pretty key. That depending on movement in other MPOs and even projects within our own MPO, over-programming allows us to be more nimble and ready rather than having to go through another process if additional funding becomes available, or if for whatever reason a project doesn't make it, or be awesome if one came in under budget, but that doesn't seem to be happening given the cost of inflation on construction projects. But, there's some opportunities to sort of be prepared in advance, either, and they've broken it down, to look at 15, 30, and even 50%.
Yeah, that's a perfect explanation, actually. So, yeah, over-programming is very, very similar to the way airlines overbook a flight. Like any given flight, a few passengers aren't going to make it on board, and so you overbook those seats. But it's kind of a similar concept where we know, developing and constructing projects is inherently complex, and no matter how well we do readiness and no matter how well we develop a project, there's always this inherent risk with a given project and getting it to let for construction. And so traditionally we've always done 15%. 1 in 5 projects in any given fiscal year may have to shift into another fiscal year because of some issue. I think a recent example that kind of made me, it's not funny, but it was just the Commissioner Terrio, we were working on SH-142, and I believe y'all had a bald eagle make a nest on the right-of-way. So there's things you just can't account for in the project development process, and so that's going to, it's just one of those things that just happens. And
that is one of the better delay stories.
Yeah, no, that's so now that we're going to have to work around the nesting schedule and when that nest may potentially be, I think they're temporary nests and they abandon it at some point after they've nested, but those are things you can't account for for. And I think that's just a good example of every project, no matter how well we assess the readiness, there's always this inherent risk. And so that's why we overprogram. We work under the assumption that not every project's going to let, particularly on schedule, but we do our best to manage that. And so that's why we do it. And so currently we've always done 15%, but now we're recommending a higher rate. So the recommendation from staff is that we will do the 30% over programming. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one is one that y'all have mentioned, is that there's a lot more funding out there. If funding becomes available from the federal government, gets redistributed for whatever reason, or if it's being unused in other parts of the state, we have purchase over, opportunity to get those funds on our projects. And so making sure that if we have those projects programmed, we can easily absorb those funds. A good example of that actually happened this year where the TIFIA loan program, I don't know that acronym offhand, Ashby, but the TIFIA loan program had a lot of unused funding, and so they redistributed that through the other federal programs, and we actually got a $6 million bump in our SDBG funding allocation this year from that TIFIA loan program. So that's an example of $6 million that just came out of thin air, essentially, and it's included in that number there, but that's an example of opportunities for funding. And we're always monitoring and talking with TxDOT Finance about other areas of the state that are not using funds, and so that's one reason why we overprogram. It really sets us up for additional funding. But the other reason, I think just as important, is that the projects that we are funding now are larger than ever before. And I'm going to use Pierce Lane for an example. This is the largest non-TxDOT sponsored project that we've ever funded, and there's $71 million on that project. It's currently scheduled for fiscal year 28. And I know the Travis County staff are working very, very hard to get that project ready for fiscal year 2028. But if that project for some reason needs to shift, if a bald eagle decides to nest over Pierce Lane, for example, and they need to shift until fiscal year 2029, that's over close to $2 million, 2 years worth of annual apportionment on our books is going to be unused in fiscal year 28. So that encourages us to if we have overprogrammed projects in fiscal year 28, we don't have to worry about that as much. And this goes back to the TAC rule too, where we're keeping a very close eye on our funding utilization rate. So if we hit over 200% of our annual apportionment, and it's sitting in our bank account unused, and then TxDOT has the authority to move it around. Obviously, they will discuss that with us before that happens, but it's just really more of an insurance policy more than anything else to make sure we're hitting our funding utilization rates. And so that's why we're recommending a more aggressive rate of 30% as opposed to 15%. Now, there is argument to even go higher than 30% in Ashby. I know you've had discussions with TxDOT, and you may want to expand on this, but there's an argument to go to that 50% over allocation rate. Because I do want to say, if we run into an instance where all of our projects happen to be ready at the same time, we've overprogrammed, and we've got more people trying to squeeze through that door, we would ask TxDOT to use advanced construction funding on one of those projects. Now, advanced construction funding is basically a cash advance that TxDOT can provide us that gets paid back with future apportionment funding. So that's an important tool that we do have available. So if all 5 of the projects happen to be ready and we're over-programmed, we have the ability to, there's some flexibility there where we can actually, all 5 of them let at the same time with advanced construction funding. And then if that's not an option, the worst case scenario is that we move one of those projects out. So the risk is pretty low if we happen to have all of them ready. That's an unlikely scenario given how complex project development is. But yeah, so, and with that...
So, Mayor, you got a question? I just had a question trying to make sure I understand it correctly. I'm stuck on your analogy about overbooking flights, which I would never make from the dais in my city. Just not always a popular thing because people get bumped from their flights. But it sounds like with the advanced funding, if I'm understanding correctly, like, well, we have the ability sometimes, if necessary, to grow the plane, which of course you can't do when you've overbooked an actual flight.
Yeah, if all the passengers happen to show up, we can let somebody sit in the co-pilot seat or something.
Yeah, I've tried
we'll squeeze them in there somewhere.
Yeah, even though I had status, they wouldn't let me do it. But okay, that's a very helpful explanation.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you have a
Commissioner?
Because I have a question, but
I'll
you
go
have your
after you.
hand. So my question is just practically, does that mean when we score the projects, we just sort of keep, we rank them, or y'all rank them or something, and then we just keep going to a bigger pile of project money than we have?
So the way we would do it, if y'all either want to stick with the 15% or go higher, or go back to no over-programming at all, because that's your option. So whatever that, you tell me the number cutoff is, we're going to stop at the cutoff. And then if it's 15%, we'll just program that in, and the cut line will move down. So we'll just keep moving the cut line down. But, you know, and here's what, so we're recommending 30% right now. So as background for y'all, when I worked for Federal Highway Administration, and we were reviewing states' programming of federal funds, we generally told them 15% was the rule of thumb for over-programming. Now that was, you know, 2 decades ago. So, and things have sort of changed a little bit since then. What led to the 30% is, in January of this year, I was in a meeting with Mark Williams, who is the executive director for TxDOT, and I said, I'm considering over-programming by 30% instead of 15% like I do today. And he said, I think you ought to consider 50%. I'm already willing to double what I was doing. I'm a little hesitant about going to 50 right now. I'd like to try.
Practically, what's the difference? Does that mean a project is spinning their wheels, getting ready, but there might not be funding for them?
Correct. So there is that. I'd like to see how we do with the 30% before, because what we would do if we went to 50%, or what I would suggest as a hybrid sort of solution, is let's do 30% and see how we're doing. Yeah. And then if it looks like we're making a lot of progress on that, then we just keep going down below the cut line until we hit the 50% number.
It seems like a like you could just keep going.
We can, as long as somebody's been working, as long as those folks that were below the cut line, as long as they're working to keep making sure that project's going to be ready to go, then we're good.
And I think part of that is what Ryan brought up when he said that 1 out of 5 is the average that usually has to be pushed. So then that makes sense to look at 30%. And just like you said, we have a running list. So it's like, okay, you're there, but you're on deck. And if something does happen where, oh, okay, just what happens at universities, right? Like, wait a minute, these number of people usually accept our admissions. We over-commit just in case, just to cover for all those people, and all of a sudden everyone gets at the same time. What resources do we have to make sure to take care of that? You mentioned, you know, what we can actually get. What is it called, the exact word? Advanced construction funding. Yes. To actually work for that, which is good. And again, this is a good policy discussion about, hey, listen, what is this like from that?
Yes, and I just wanted to highlight, thank you, Ashby, for including this on this consideration. Colleagues, part of the conversation we want to have as a board is to understand what are policy-making decision points for us as the MPO board. So the information that is being presented here, we can have a better understanding of the alternatives that staff considered before making the recommendation. Obviously, the recommendation today is 30% for the overprogramming, but this at least gives us options as to what all staff considered, and if there's any discussion or questions that we have, should we want to go a little bit higher. And I think framing it this way is helpful in us having that robust conversation, so I really appreciate it. The question I have is around timing of the call for projects, because this is for starting fiscal year 28. Now our governmental entities be working with our staffs to submit projects for consideration. I'm curious, has it always been this early for us to have a call for projects at least 2 years out? And can you also just shed some light of how challenging it is to say, I will have this project ready to go 2 years from now? You know, how does that fare with other MPOs' approaches to this, and any context that we should know in making this consideration?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think so. The process itself, before we even get a recommendation and you're making a decision on a project, is a year. So that takes care of 1 year, and then once y'all make a selection on that recommendation and y'all have approved the projects, they have to be programmed in the TIP, and then they go through the advanced funding agreement process, which typically can take close to a year. So those are the 2 years right there.
TxDOT's going to speed that up, right, Tucker?
Yeah. So there's a lot, like, once you federalize a project, there's a lot of upfront paperwork that has to happen, basically. And so we want to make sure that the second we hit that fiscal year, that those projects are ready to go and can move forward. So we want to have an executed advanced funding agreement at that point. And so 2 years is a rough estimate of how long that process takes between kicking off a call for projects to a project getting an executed advanced funding agreement and that funding being obligated in the federal system. So it's a lengthy process, and so timing that, and our process looks at that. So as long as you're 2 years out when you submit your project, we definitely look at those milestones to make sure you hit those things, but that's the average time it takes for these processes, and that's why we're starting so early.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Mayor Pro Tem, to your question about what the other MPOs do in terms of Texas, to my knowledge, we are the only ones tracking the projects monthly and making sure they're hitting the milestones. So we know whether or not, we have a pretty good idea whether or not something's going to slip or make it. And then by knowing that, we can go to the sponsor when we look like we're seeing trouble and say, hey, is there something we can do to help, or is there an issue that we need to help you address? And so that way we're managing things on the back end better for you as the board, rather than being caught by surprise later.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mayor.
Can I ask a question about the over-programming? Could a entity go even one step further and start a project that was approved, and then if there's funding left over in a given year that is not used for programming, that was otherwise going to get sent back? Do we have to wait if we've got projects that would otherwise be on the list and be part of the programming?
So the short answer is, using your example, if that local government went ahead and started the project and then this issue happened, you as the local government could only be paid out of federal funds for the portion of the expenses that happened after your advanced funding agreement took place. So anything that you spent before that, you don't get that money.
No, I understood, yeah, but if it was a, $50 million project, we started and we're, halfway through it, there's money left over that year that because some other project got delayed and we were otherwise going to send it back, that project had been approved as part of the call, but was just later in the program.
So, and I'm going to look and ask Ryan to check me for what I'm about to tell you. As long as what was submitted by the local government and approved by the board, as long as that phase of the project that was left was what was approved and went out for public comment, then we're good.
Yeah, because I'm saying, I think we've got a lot of pent-up demand, and I think there are folks that are going to be willing to go beyond shovel-ready and start shoveling. I think we're going to be going out for bond and have projects ready to go that we would also like to submit, as part of the call, and would like to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
That was what happened with Cedar Park and New Hope Drive extension. It was exactly that, right? It had been approved and pushed back because of the I-35 reprioritization of funds, and that's why we got that IOU, basically.
Well, that was sort of the special disposition that we took related to any projects that were deferred because of the I-35 project. That's not a normal process.
Yeah.
I think he officially did get an IOU, though, with the note.
I just want to always remind everybody here that we're owed that. Thank you.
Chair, I've got a question.
I'm sorry, we're
over here.
The Commissioner.
Well, it was in line with what the gentleman just said, because this is the first time I've heard the term shovel-ready, and I was wondering, because I have been hearing ready to go, projects that are ready to go, and I don't know if it's just the process of getting that project ready to go and submit, or can a project be shovel-ready and also qualify? And I guess I just wanted clarification.
We want it shovel-ready.
Okay.
We want it shovel-ready.
Projects score really well.
It scores much higher.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have a much better assurance that that project's going to hit the milestones for later.
Okay. I thought so, but just wanted clarification.
Yeah, and for example, and I don't know what their process is, but there are some MPOs that only accept shovel-ready projects. They don't fund planning projects.
And then there's another one in the state that I will not name that puts projects in the tip knowing that they won't be ready for 10 years. And I don't know how you can put a project in the 4-year document that won't be ready in 10 years, but...
Chair, on our briefing this morning, I was under the understanding that unlike in other years perhaps, this call does allow for phasing of projects where you might be asking for funding of an early phase that isn't necessarily shovel-ready, but maybe it's research-ready or design-ready or something. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's correct, Commissioner. So, so let's say if you asked for a phase of a project and it was engineering or design or something like that, we feel pretty sure that those things are going to happen probably much quicker than the construction phase in some cases. But
so that meets the concern about spending the money. Is that what you're saying?
It does.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, because it's project-specific. So if you submitted for the engineering and utility and whatever for a project and get that done, that's done because you didn't submit for the construction piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this? So are you finished, Ryan, or do you want us to make it?
That was the last slide, so yeah, we can bring back the...
As a board, we need to be prepared next month when we'll have this as an action item to decide, do we want to continue on at the 15%, 30%, or 50%? So that's something, and I think I hear Ashby and staff saying 30%, but the projects still will all be scored. And so even if we stop at 30%, there'll still be a score for those below the line. So.
Yep.
All right. Okay, if there's no other questions, we will move on to...
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I had one more question. I was waiting to see if we'd seen all the slides. So, because I wasn't on the committee, and I'm just hearing that there's going to be a recommended change to the scoring criteria, can you tell us ahead of time, is it going to be under project readiness, planning factors, or the cost-benefit analysis where that change is being proposed?
Yeah, so, well, for this change, this won't have anything to do with it, but the nonprofit change will be under readiness and eligibility, which are kind of together. So that language in the guide for regional project selection, I'll bring that language back to the board so they can see that, but that will be a change under the eligible sponsors on the project listings. So hopefully that.
Is that something we could get a little bit earlier in the process, like even before the packet, just since it seems like that's something that the committee looked at and it is effectively the recommendation of the committee, but the rest of this body didn't have the opportunity to see any of these slides or the slides that the committee saw? I think it would be helpful to just be able to have a complete packet of information so that we're understanding if there's additional questions we want to ask prior to the agenda packet coming out, that there would be an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and just to be, this particular thing was something that came up in part of the discussion. I don't even remember it being part of the slides.
It wasn't.
But the presentations that happened in the subcommittee were largely things they were consolidated, but largely things that this board has seen over the years. Very little of it was new information.
Yeah.
So.
But if you cleared, I'm happy to send the slides and the language out.
Yeah, we'll just put it up on the web.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get it out.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just one more comment. I want to circle back on the scoring as well, because the impression I got from Councilmember Lane and others, it was felt like a bit of an interim report out in a lot of ways, because like there was obviously only so much time to go through some of these thornier issues like waiting around various priorities. But I feel like at the heart of it, like those are policy decisions that the policy board exists to weigh. And so if the applications aren't due till January 23rd, 2026, well, I don't understand why we couldn't take a couple months for that subcommittee to kind of wade through some of those other issues and maybe report back. So
just to be clear, there are two different topics. There's the plan, the long-term plan, and then there's the TIP, the funding piece. There was only one recommendation out of the funding piece, and that we were fairly, and the other questions and stuff that came up are related to the long-range plan that's not affected by this. So that's for a discussion for another day, but it wasn't time-sensitive. It was just this topic that was time-sensitive, if that makes sense.
I think I understand as far as the ITP, like, yeah, they're almost 5 years out now, a little less than, I guess. But for like our kind of semi-annual TIP updates, like this criteria is still getting applied, right? And so wouldn't the scoring
So this is getting applied for funding, not necessarily for the TIP updates. This is simply for funding award, because the TIP updates are different. This is just funding of projects that would go into the TIP.
So, Mayor.
Yeah, can you do that line delineation?
So, I'm going to answer what I think I'm hearing you ask, which is, you're saying the call doesn't come till the end of the year. You were asking, could we talk some more about the weights between now and then? And the answer to that is, right now what we're doing, because if you look at that schedule, we've got stuff that happens before the end of the year where we're working with the local government sponsors and talking to them about their ideas for project submittals, and those are very active discussions. And because all that information is now out there and on the internet today with the weights in it, they can run through that, and we encourage them to do that and see where they score better, under which categories, and then also whether or not they want to do phases or break it into pieces, and they can see how the scoring works. If you, well, shouldn't say you, if the board is still talking about changing that coming up to the end of the year, then that pushes us back, because then they don't know what the weights look like yet. They don't know, so that pushes us back another 6 months or so.
Yeah, so really the deadline to make any changes is next month on any of this piece. I think some of the other topics that were spoken of are things that will affect what projects go into the long-range plan, but not affected by our current deadline.
Yeah.
All right, so before we lose quorum, let's move on to Doyce and an update on the participation plan.
Thank you, Chair Long. So we are making some updates to the public participation plan, and you should have received a link to the draft update in your packets, as well as it was posted online. So we're needing to make some updates because there are some presidential executive orders that are referenced in the current public participation plan, the PPP, that have been rescinded. So we're having to reflect that, as well as updating some of the new federal guidance. The proposed update does not make any changes to the outreach requirements or processes that we have in place today. And we're also updating the PPP to reflect more recently used tools and technologies. Since this was last updated in 2019, we have consistently been using interactive comment maps on some of the projects and studies we've done in Caldwell County, as well as some of the project readiness studies we're doing right now in partnership with TxDOT. So I just wanted to do an overview of the public participation plan updates that were made in 2019. Many members of the board are new since that time frame, so I just wanted to review some of those. Prior to 2019, the public participation plan had a tiered approach. So the regional transportation plan, the 2050 plan that's in place right now, was the only program in the PPP that had specific outreach requirements. Back in 2018 and 2019, we were doing a lot more studies with some of the local governments. The city of Georgetown was one of the first studies that we did in partnership with the local government. There wasn't anything in the PPP to reflect the outreach requirements for some of those local studies, as well as some of the regional studies we were doing leading up to the 2045 RTP. So we conducted a regional active transportation plan, a regional transit study, and other mode-specific studies leading up to the 2045 plan. And we thought it was important in 2019, prior to the board considering and adopting the 2045 plan, that we have outreach requirements specific for all of the studies we were conducting. So those were updated. We also added requirements for the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. Prior to 2019, there were no outreach requirements specific for the TIP or for TIP amendments, and also CAMPO studies like the project readiness studies that we're doing right now with TxDOT. We also, in 2019, prior to COVID, I'll say, added a requirement requiring online open houses and commenting for all of the public input that we were requesting and all of those public engagement opportunities. So even prior to 2020 and many things moving online, we were requiring that prior to that. We also, back in 2019, added notifications for the community be required for social media and also on the website. There wasn't that technology update that was done prior to that, so we thought that was important to include. We also added more examples of the practices that we had in place in the appendix in 2019. Since that time, we've actually done quite a few presentations. We've presented to the National MPO Conference about some of the outreach opportunities and requirements that we had for some of the rural communities and some of the areas that don't have access to high-speed internet. We've also presented on the different methods that we've used for the visually impaired communities, and also we've presented on some of the Caldwell County studies and information that we've done there. So we've done some of those presentations through the Transportation Research Board. That's the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And I'm actually excited to say that I was selected to serve on the TRB Communication and Public Engagement Committee. So I'll start that 3-year appointment this year.
Congratulations on that, Joyce.
Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to give you a shout out because this process has really evolved over the years, and I would argue to say it's probably one of the most transparent ones anywhere, and people could, anybody that said they couldn't get engaged with our outreach process, I'd be doubtful, because there's just a plethora of different opportunities, and you've worked really hard to do that, so kudos.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to reiterate some of the requirements that we do have in place and that none of these are changing. It is simply an update to some of the tools that we're using in the appendix, as well as reference to some of the federal guidance that needs to be updated. So the timeline for this, the public participation plan update does require a 45-day public comment period, and that opened on September 2nd. We've had a number of in-person open houses, and those will continue through this week, as well as the online open house that will be open through October 17th. So we're presenting this as an information item today. The public hearing will be at your next board meeting, October 6th, and then this will come back before this board on November 10th for action. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions of Joyce on this? Okay. Great. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 12, which is a brief update from our legal counsel and Joyce on some legislative changes and some bills that we might want to pay attention to.
Thank you, Chair Long. So just a quick legislative update from the 89th regular session. There were a few bills that were related specifically to the Public Information Act requirements that we have. So HB 1522 relates to open meetings postings, and so that requires at least 3 business days. We've actually already been exceeding that, so there's no changes to the practices that we've already had in place. HB 4214 will require that any governmental agency require the State Attorney General's office to provide the mailing address as well as an electronic mailing address or an electronic address that the public can request public information. So we will be sure to provide the State Attorney General's office with that information for anybody who wants to access public information requests with CAMPO. The next 2 bills, I will turn those over to Tim to talk through.
Thank you, Joyce. On like all of your respective jurisdictions, CAMPO and the TBB are subject to the Public Information Act, Open Meetings Act. This bill, 4219, sets up a very strict compliance deadline of 10 business days for response or rejection of public information requests. That's not really new. All of you probably comply with that already. We do too. What's different about this bill is it now sets up a complaint and sanction feature that involves the Texas Attorney General, where if you're not complying with that, the Attorney General can come and make you take additional training, forced additional mandatory training, and waive your cost in connection with any action on that particular information request. Under HB 4310, probably most relevant to you all, there's now, all of you, there's now a specific statutory provision allowing for the entity that's responding to a request from a member of the board or elected body, where it's appropriate and where the information is confidential as defined under the PIA, to require the requesting board member, elected official, et cetera, to sign a confidentiality agreement, which is interesting, but also creates a process whereby that the member of the board may complain and seek a decision from the Attorney General's office. I know I have never run into that here in this body. I have run into it with some of the other jurisdiction I act as attorney for. This sort of sets out the rules of the game, because a lot of different jurisdictions have different solutions to that problem, where there's a fraught political issue going on in the board. Board members are seeking different information for various purposes, some of them all good and true, others highly political, and you get into questions of process. This sets out a process and a way to deal with it, and a process for the elected official to seek to overturn the entity's decision on a confidentiality or not. So if you have any other questions about any of the other number of bills that were passed in this area, please feel free to reach out.
And a few Senate bills that may be of interest to this body. So Senate Bill 1555, that directs TxDOT to establish a grant program for railroad grade separation projects. SB 1121, this exempts broadband projects from things that are required, projects that are exempted from archaeological studies. So if there's a roadway project, if there's some kind of broadband project going into the existing right-of-way, then that broadband project, along with a number of other projects that are already in state law, do not have to do an archaeological study. And then finally, SB 1366, this includes information about construction maintenance work zones in driver's ed and driver safety courses curriculum.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joyce.
One question. Are you saying in 1123 that there doesn't have to be a study to ensure that we're not going through cemeteries and graveyards?
This is for projects that are already within existing roadway right-of-way, and so it's, I guess the assumption is that those roadways that have been established already had an archaeological study done, and so if you're putting broadband fiber into that existing right-of-way that already exists, already has a roadway, then it, along with many other things that are already in state law, no longer have to have an archaeological study.
If there's no other questions on that, I do want to circle back real quick on item number 8, just for a clarification for the minutes. And, I mentioned that it's in compliance with the Williamson County percentages, et cetera, with the assumption that that will take place the first paycheck of the next fiscal year. So just clarify for that.
Thank you.
All right, Executive Director's report.
I don't have anything, Madam Chair.
Okay. Announcements, just as a reminder, the next TAC meeting will be on September 22nd, and our next policy board meeting will be October 6th. That's the first Monday, not the second one, so make sure you're not coming to the wrong meeting. And so with that, we will stand adjourned at 3:39. Thank you all for attending. Julie.